But the tension
still
is,
that tension.
I am both those stories.
Yeah.
But let me answer one other thing to that. There's a North American theologian, Marva Dawn, and she has written a bit about this, and has written about, she sort of raises the questions. What would happen if, instead of those places where we see violence and oppression going on in the world, instead of going in with all our guns blazing to liberate the people, we were sending food, we were sending aid, we were doing things that actually were gospel things, right? That were working for justice in those places without saying justice only comes right here. Get ready to die. But justice comes here when we open up our hands to you. And so what would be happening in Iraq if instead of ramping up our sanctions to military conflict, we instead started sending in aid, started showing the people of Iraq that Saddam Hussein is a problem, not just because he's oppressing them and we're going to come in and topple him, but he's a problem because there's these other parts of the world that are so generous in comparison to him. What kind of effect would that have? That's the one thing. The other thing is, I don't know, well, yes, you do. One of your Christian peacemakers was also taken hostage in Iraq. You know about Christian peacemaker teams? These are people who say, we need to be willing to lay down our life to bring peace, not by wielding a sword, but by going in and doing the actual walking alongside people that leads to peace. So not only will we help Palestinians walk to school so that they don't get shot by Israelis, but we'll ride the buses where the suicide bombers regularly set off their blasts, because when there are foreigners on their buses, those buses, they don't do it. Or we will go to Iraq, and when American soldiers come into Iraqi houses where nobody can speak English and take their men off to jail, and nobody knows what's going on, nobody knows why their husbands have been taken off to jail, we will go in there and we will translate and help these women find their men and help to explain what's going on, which is what it's Norman Kimber,
Yeah.
Norman Kimber and Doug Loney were doing, and Tom Fox were doing when they were captured by those that kind of fringe group that they were taken hostage by. So there are people working for peace in the places where conflict is happening in ways that actually bring hope, ways that a gun can't bring it. So I hope that helps a bit more.
Need to be discussed further over lunch, but I imagine that there's more you would like to ask on it.
Till 12:30.
I'd like to try and bring that question up to date. It seems to me the issue facing us in the UK today is the vote in the Commons on Wednesday about 42 days, which has been a huge political issue. I want the politics out of it. It's the justice that I think is worth focusing on. And it seems to me the problem the government is facing is the problem of a potential accident, and the question in the back of their mind is the question, to what risk are you willing to subject innocent citizens? And to what effort will you go to try to root out that risk and identify the culprits? Now, your response yesterday was 42 days, that's outrageous. Why? How as Home Secretary, I'm not talking about a personal response here, I'm talking about a national political response, a government response, national justice. Why would you say 42 days is far too long?
Well, I'm not necessarily wanting to say anything specific about this particular debate. I've not followed it closely, but even the kinds of things that John Major was reported to have said in the papers yesterday about what this does to the very character of British justice and what it does to your very understanding of what due process looks like, and why you have a constitution with certain kinds of protections. I think that's a very important question to be asked in Britain around 42 days being held without charge, and the same kind of thing in the United States and in Canada, where you can be held indefinitely in Canada and the United States. So I'm glad you guys are talking about putting a limit on how long, but you can be held indefinitely and with no charge brought against you, and no requirement that any evidence that has been found against you, no requirement that that evidence be made public to you, be made known to you. Okay?
In the UK, you have to make the evidence public, and there is a limit today of 28 days.
Right?
And the issue is, should we raise it to 42 for certain types of events which are particularly complex, says the government? Evidence might be in many parts of the world. That's not an unreasonable suggestion in a global world where training happens in Pakistan, for example. And they're saying it must individually be approved by courts.
It must, sorry?
A judge must approve each individual case where this is exercised. This right of the government is proposed. It must be approved by a court. The court will act in secret for obvious reasons, but the evidence, once the charge is made, would always in the UK be made public. We don't have secret charges. We don't have indefinite detention.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I'm willing to acknowledge that's better than what we have in North America. And so I think that the question is, I acknowledge it's a complicated question, but I think that the question is, what is a just period of time? And the issue has to be thought through in terms of British notions of what justice is, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do know that, again, in North America and also in New Zealand, when I was in New Zealand in the fall, I mean, we have people being charged of engaging in terrorist training, and their crime really was that they went camping and played paintball, and they happened to be Muslims, Or in New Zealand, they went camping, they played paintball, and they happened to be Maoris, right? So I am worried. I'm worried about a certain level of mass anxiety that makes it seem incredibly necessary that the government must look like it is doing something. And I worry when the government wants more time to make it look like they're doing something. It just worries me.
And I guess, well, I'll let that.
Just on that point, I work with a young Muslim community leader who's a very gifted young guy. And he was telling me yesterday, the day before yesterday, we were driving back from a meeting. And I was saying to him, there's a demonstration at an American base on the 4th of July every year. And I was saying, why not get some young Muslims up to that event? Because it would show them that there are ways of protesting, of not liking British and American foreign policy in the Middle East and whatever, which are positive and law-abiding and aren't terrorism. And he said, I wouldn't go near it. I wouldn't dare go anywhere near anything like that. And I said, well, why not? And he said, I know somebody who's been held in detention. I know what happened to them. I do not want to go to jail for 42 days. And he said, if I go anywhere near that, I will be a marked man. And it struck me, and I just thought, this is crazy that here are people who are living in the shadow of empire, not their empire, our empire, who are in a similar position, in a way, to how you were saying the Christian community were in Rome. We have centuries and centuries of the Christian community actually being the legitimating body of empire. What do you say, what does the church do? Do we simply love our enemies and feed them? Is there a place for raising our voices, for taking direct action? What would the gospel be to the Muslim community in Britain at the moment, as they are maybe much more clear-sighted about some of the evils that the Western so-called Christian empire is perpetrating on their people?
Yeah.
And this kind of, that kind of situation is precisely the kind of situation that Paul was writing the letter to the Romans to, right? The Jewish Christians, or the Jews, just because they're Jews, are experiencing certain kind of persecutions at the hands of the empire, just because they're Jews. And I guess that would be my question about the 42 days. I look around this room, and there's very few of us, Justin might be worried. As, you know, his skin color is a little